What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Takeaways from Corbin Burnes' presser with the Dbacks, and is there a bidding war for Randal Grichuk?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we're doing our big takeaways from the Corbin Burnes introductory press conference, some good tidbits and nuggets from Corbin, and some fun quotes from Ken Kendrick, which we'll get into in the podcast. And then also, is there a little bidding war for Randal Grichuk right now? We'll discuss what other teams are interested in him and some potential replacements for Grichuk in segment number 3. So a whole bunch I want to talk to you guys about today. But first, I want to say thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Now let's discuss our takeaways from the Corbin Burnes presser. I wrote down 8. Some of these are like kind of married and linked together. I had a great time, 35 minutes of watching Corbin Burnes. It starts off a little slow, but once he puts that jersey on, I feel like the whole conversation and energy in the room just flips and it gets a little bit more jovial. There's some more jokes, but we also get some more insight from Corbin Burnes. And the first thing I want to discuss, this is not even something that was like super important from the press conference, but if you guys follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24, as you guys see right there in the little corner, I posted this graphic today of my favorite quote from the presser, and it kind of went viral, at least in Dbacks community. You know, depends what your definition of viral is. It had like 500 likes, like 50 retweets. Made me feel good as a podcast host. It was a graphic just showing the quote of Ken Kendrick from the presser, where he discussed and said, essentially, Dbacks fans expect a good product. They expect a winning product. Meanwhile, Chicago Cubs fans, they operate a little differently. It was a great shot by Ken Kendrick at Chicago Cubs fans saying, Dbacks fans, we expect a great product and we hold ownership to that level of making sure we always have a good product on the field. Meanwhile, the Chicago Cubs fans, I mean, they'll take slop and they'll be happy with slop. Do Cubs fans really feel like that? I don't know, but we know that Cubs franchise, prior to breaking that World Series streak, right? A long time with doing nothing. And since that World Series, what have they really done? A whole lot of nothing. That whole, all those owners in Chicago, the Reinsdorf mostly, just absolutely terrible. So I thought that was a great quote by Ken Kendrick. He immediately tried to backtrack. He, like, literally, as soon as he said that, he was like, no shot, no disrespect at Cubs fans. But over here in Arizona, our fan base expects something a little bit more from our ownership and our team, and I absolutely love that. Some people took it out of context like he was calling us fair weather fans. No, Ken Kendrick was saying Dbacks fans have an expectation and want the team to be good, and that's why they come out and support when the team does win. So love that quote from Ken Kendrick. Now, back to Corbin Burnes. When looking at this whole deal, Corbin Burnes to the Dbacks, you really understood how it came together and why it came together during the presser. And it really came down to like one big thing. And it's something you don't talk a lot about in sports, the human aspect of sports, which is Corbin Burnes recently had twins with his wife, and they just wanted to stay together as a family. They didn't want him going back to Baltimore, being across the country, going to another state or something like that. Corbin Burnes moved here in 2018, apparently. You could have gone and walked around, Paradise Valley, maybe in Fashion Square Mall, run into Corbin Burnes over the last few years. And this has been his home for a few years now, and he just had twins. And Corbin Burnes, at the end of the day, just wanted to be near his family. He's in his early 30s. He didn't want to move. And so that's really the nexus of how this deal started. Just from a guy wanting to be near his family. Like if Corbin Burnes moved to San Diego in 2018, would he be signed with the Padres right now if he still had twins a few months ago? Yeah, probably. Like to Corbin Burnes, I'm sure the fact that the Dbacks were in the World Series a couple years ago definitely mattered. I'm sure the fact that the Dbacks were willing to give him franchise record money definitely mattered. The fact that we had a roster and a GM and ownership and coaching all trying to work together to build a winning product, I'm sure all of that really mattered to Corbin Burnes. But I still believe at the end of the day, the number one thing on his offseason wish list was how close can I be to my family? And he chose the team that's closest to his family. So not upset at all. I think that's something that we have to take more into consideration when we're discussing free agency and player this, player that leaving. Like, what is their family situation like? Do they want to uproot their kids from their school, from their friends, their wife? Like, people have whole lives invested in their community. And it's not that easy to just uproot them if you don't have to, right? If you're being traded, that's one thing. But if you're a free agent like Corbin was, you don't always want to have to move. So not surprised to see the fact that Corbin wanted to stay near his family. I'm just surprised that he moved to Arizona and the team closest to his family was the D-backs. So it was Corbin who really got this deal together. Really cool to see. Mike Hazen, one of the quotes I liked from him, we're just kind of jumping all around from each guy. Hazen discussed how there's still a lot of work to do this offseason. I had someone in my comments the other day talking about, this is why the Dodgers are the best. The D-backs are content. Meanwhile, the Dodgers are still out there doing moves. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Dude, in my comment section, what are you saying? Why do you believe the D-backs are done this offseason? Prior to the Corbin Burnes signing, we knew they weren't done. Post Corbin Burnes signing, in the presser, Mike Hazen said, we still have a lot of work to do, still a long offseason ahead of us. We know that rotation has a logjam with 7 starters right now. You have to trade some people. Mike Hazen joked that we know one of the projected starters is going to be Corbin Burnes, but kind of left it open-ended, like anyone could be on the table for the right price. And again, as I've said before, maybe guys like Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly should be on the trading table, right? They're both pending free agents. Maybe it's better to trade them now at their highest value instead of letting them walk in free agency. Fott and Ryan Nelson, 2 young starters who are very controllable for the next few years. That could probably net you something very nice. Or if you want a veteran pitcher, Jordan Montgomery, Erod, who are overexpensive, overpaid, but could potentially have a bounce back and look like a number 2, number 3 starter for you. Like the D-backs have these groups of, you could have a frontline starter in Kelly or Gallen, you could have a young starter with controllable money in Nelson or Fott, or you could have a potential bounce back veteran who might be a little expensive in Monty and Erod. D-backs have so many options with their starting pitching. They will certainly try to trade one of their starters this offseason, and we'll see if Mike Hazen can do it because, like he said, D-backs still have a lot of work to do this offseason. And we still have a lot more takeaways to discuss from Corbin Burnes' presser in segment number 2. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and it helps to lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place, whether it's subscriptions or your spending habits or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, back here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss some more takeaways that we had from the Corbin Burnes presser. Again, we're jumping around. This one is from Scott Boras, the agent of Corbin Burnes, and he said the first person to reach out to Corbin, I believe this was from Scott Boras, but I'm pretty sure he said it was Zach Gallen, and I just thought that was really cool to see because as a number one starting pitcher, I'm not in that mindset, of course. I've never been that guy, but I would like to imagine if I put myself in those shoes where I'm the man for a rotation, the man for a team, and I heard my team just signed a guy who potentially is better than me that just stole my spot in my rotation as the opening day guy. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if me, Millard Thomas, felt some kind of way in that situation. So I wouldn't cast any aspersions on Zach Gallen if he also felt some type of way in that situation, right? Imagine you were the man, the woman at your company, and then all of a sudden your company hires someone else who take your role, basically kind of moves you into that number two backseat, like you were the president of whatever, and now all of a sudden you're the vice president. That's kind of what Zach Gallen was, right? He was the number one ace of the staff, and now it's like he's still an ace, but now he's the number two starter, right? So for some people, especially in a contract year for Gallen, like he might have wanted to have that label, the moniker of number one starter in the rotation, opening day starter, all of that, right? But now a lot of that's probably going to go to Corbin Burnes next season. So the fact that Zach Gallen didn't have any animosity toward Corbin Burnes, I thought was cool. Burnes actually said in the presser that the person that he probably has the best relationship with in the organization is Zach Gallen. Sounds like from the All-Star games in the past, from just being two pitchers that battled each other. It sounds like they just have already a relationship there. So it's not a surprise to see Zach Gallen was the first one to reach out. That kind of goes into my next quote from Corbin Burnes, where he says he wants there to be a sense of competition between the pitchers. And I absolutely love that quote from Corbin because I think that's how it should be. Corbin and those other starters should push themselves and push each other. I love the idea of Corbin Burnes going out there for a start, pitching 7 innings of dominant one-run ball, 8 Ks. He goes back to the dugout and it's like, Gallen, let's see if you could do better than that tomorrow. And then Gallen goes out there, he dominates, he comes back and goes, Corbin, look at that, look at my performance. Merrill, can you do that? And you just have that down the line. Guys, spring training, camp, all of them believe that they could be the number one starter, right? Gallen should feel like he should be the number one starter. I want that friendly competition with Corbin Burnes, right? Merrill Kelly could go out there and say, you know what? I know no one views me as the number one starter, but if we're talking about real production the last 2-3 years, the real fans know I've been the best pitcher on this staff. And so why shouldn't Merrill Kelly insert himself into that friendly competition, right? If you're Jordan Montgomery, I'm sure you're already fired up. If you're in their rotation or at least battling for a rotation spot next year, I'm sure Monty would be fired up. If you're a guy like Brandon Pfaadt and you see Gallen, Burnes, Kelly, these dominant studs all battling out with each other, does that not make you better as a young starter? Same with Ryan Nelson. If you're Erod, does that not make you want to fight to stay in better shape, better health, maybe fight through injuries? Like, I love the idea of a sense of competition among our rotation, as long as it's healthy and friendly, of course. Right? I don't want to see people actually have animosity, but I would love the idea of them talking crap, talking mess to each other after a great start. Nothing negative, right? I don't want Gallen to go out there, get shelled for 5 runs in 2 innings. He gets back to the locker room and Erod says, hey, friend, what happened there? Like, I don't want any of that now. I still want to keep it friendly. So I would love a sense of competition between the D-back starters in the rotation. Ken Kendrick admitted he didn't think this would ever happen. He said at the beginning of the offseason, when you did the D-backs big board and laid out the offseason plan, he said Corbin Burnes was not mentioned. He was not in the plan at all. He did not think there was any world where they could get him. And again, this was the deal set up by Corbin. Corbin was the one with his family that said, we don't want to leave Arizona. Let's see if the D-backs can make something work. His representatives reached out to the D-backs front office. And once Arizona found out they had interest, Ken Kendrick was like, yeah, we got this done in like 3 days. Once we knew it was possible to get a guy that caliber, once we looked at the money and the figures and we're like, yeah, we can make that work, we went after it. Now, after hearing all that, I was like, oh, the money, once you heard the money, you're like, oh, you can make that work. But somehow we couldn't pay Christian Walker. Maybe, again, that still might be good business at the end of the deal. Let 34-year-old Walker walk. Let 27-year-old Josh Naylor, who's cheaper, come in. Like, at the end of the day, that might be good business depending on the season. Naylor has. I just wish we could have kept Christian Walker at that price tag of $20 million. But glad to see Ken Kendrick pony up the money for Corbin Burnes, because this leads me into my next quote from Ken Kendrick, who admitted he's getting a little bit older and he wants to ride off into the sunset with a win. Ken Kendrick is, let me pull up his age real quick because we love Ken Kendrick, but he's 82 years old. He recognizes the situation. He sees his morality a little bit on the wall. And so for him, he knows there's not too much time left for a man in his 80s, and he wants to make sure he's putting as much product or as much revenue back into the product. And that's what he's been doing. That's what he talked a lot about the presser. He wants Dbacks fans to see his commitment to the team. He talked about how revenue has always gone back into the Dbacks on-field product. Even when they had down years, they still want to come out of it and be a good competitive ball club, because that is what Arizona fans expect. And so Ken Kendrick, I hope the Dbacks have a shot of another World Series ring while he's still around, because the roster that they currently have put together, I think, is definitely good enough for the World Series. I thought it was good enough last year. In 2023, I probably did not think that was a World Series roster. But once you get to the World Series, I was like, yeah, the D-backs can definitely win. Last year, I do think the D-backs had a World Series roster, but because of the health to the rotation, they did not make the postseason. That is still, yes, they had a whole September collapse, but if you're telling me you get 30 starts from Gallen, Kelly, Monty, Erod, and Fott, and Fott, with the number one offense in the league, that team still only wins 89 games or however many games they won to miss out on the playoffs. Like, I don't think so. And so looking at 2025, the rotation obviously upgraded. Hopefully get better health. You get Corbin Burnes now, one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball. We'll talk about where he ended up in MLB's top 10 next week on a podcast. You still got Gallen, Kelly, got Fott, you got Ryan Nelson, you got Monty, you got Erod. Like, you got 7 deep there. The lineup probably will take a step back, but also if you see that second half Corbin Carroll for the full season 2025, that's huge. McCarthy continues to get better. Maybe Perdomo continues to get better. Maybe we see a guy like Jordan Lawler make a little impact with the D-backs. Maybe someone like Tim. Oh God, why can't I remember his name? Tim Tazawa? Why can't I think of his name right now? The guy who could also be a potential backup for the D-backs. I don't know why I am blanking on his name right now. Tim Tawa? That is definitely not right. I know you guys. Tim Tawa. No, that is right. That, for some reason, that name did not sound right in my head. Tim Tawa could make an impact. He could be potentially this year's like Blaze Alexander type. Maybe Josh Naylor has a breakout season. Like, I still think the D-backs offense in terms of runs scored be top 5, top 6 in the National League, with potentially like a top 3 rotation, and then add hopefully another bullpen arm or two this offseason, because like Mike Hazen said, we still have a lot of work to do this free agency. And one guy I would love to bring back is Randal Grichuk. But unfortunately, it seems like there's a little bit of a bidding war for his services right now, which we'll discuss in segment number 3. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up the W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. My favorite thing to do on the FanDuel Sportsbook app is the same game parlay. When I see that Arizona Cardinals are playing, sometimes I like to do a little Cardinals money line. Give me a little James Conner over on rushing touchdowns, and give me Kyler Murray anytime touchdown. When that 3-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. So if you want a big smile on your face, just visit fanduel.com to join today. That's fanduel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Back here on the Locked on Dimebacks podcast, and let's discuss one of the D-backs free agents and the chances of us bringing him back. And if we don't, what are some other options? Because one guy out there right now whose name has been heating up a little bit is Randal Grichuk. And apparently the San Francisco Giants are very interested in Grichuk, as they should be, because like we always say with that Giants lineup, it's usually just a bunch of guys who we don't love. They get the Conforto times, the JD Davises, like these guys who haven't been good in a couple years, hoping for a bounce back, or just average replacement level players who they tried to make into something else. And Randal Grichuk is coming off a fantastic season. If the Giants actually picked up someone like him, I would actually be like, oh, good job, San Fran. That's actually a player I like. And I like Grichuk even more after seeing this season he just had with Arizona, because it was fantastic. I want to see Grichuk back. Dbacks, when Mike Hazen talks about still a long offseason, one of the things we need is a right-handed power bat. So I'm praying the Dbacks can bring back Grichuk. You added him in the middle of the lineup. With what he did last season as a clutch hitter, late in games, strong defender as well. Like, he was a 2.2 win player according to Baseball Reference, and just was strong all season, start to finish. And so I would love to bring Grichuk back, but seems like a team like the Giants is very interested in him. We know they don't like to spend big money on players, or when they do try to spend big money on players, they choose other teams like the D-backs. Sorry, Giants fans, you missed out on Corbin Burnes, because apparently the Giants were one of the teams that tried really hard to get Corbin Burnes, but did not happen. If they got Randal Grichuk, it would sting D-backs fans. But again, I like Grichuk, but it's not like Grichuk's a superstar. I don't know if Grichuk puts up the same numbers in San Fran in that big ballpark in a lineup that's not as strong as he did with Arizona, where it's like, we couldn't even figure out how to get Grichuk in the lineup because our lineup was so good last year. Like, he played 106 games. He probably should have played 135 games with the numbers he was putting up, but it was impossible to get him in the lineup more. Like, he played 106 games, but how many of those times was he just a pinch hitter or just had a plate appearance? Because 106 games, but only 254 plate appearances, or excuse me, 254 at bats is not a lot, because the year prior, he played 118 games and had 200 more at bats. And so despite playing 106 games, he did not have that many opportunities at the plate. Would have liked to see some more, but the lineup was just too deep for the D-backs last year. I could definitely see why the Giants would like him. You already added Millard Thomas this offseason. You got Jung Ho Lee coming back. Like, there is a world where the Giants lineup could be like respectable next year and put up some numbers. I like their rotation more than anything with Webb, Ray, Jordan Hicks, Kyle Harrison, and Justin Verlander. I think their rotation is going to be solid. The lineup is high risk, high reward, I think. Maybe mid reward. Jung Ho Lee, Willie Adames, Matt Chapman, Tyler Fitzgerald, Mike Yastrzemski, Adam Grichuk. Like, that is a bunch of dudes who I think are solid to at least good. Maybe not any stars or superstars, but Willie Adames, Matt Chapman, they can definitely be like all-star level players. And then we'll see what you get from like the rest of your team. Maybe Tyler Fitzgerald has a big breakout year too. And so there is a world where the Giants could be very good next year with that rotation. Add in a little Grichuk, and maybe that lineup could be very competitive as well. But they definitely still feel like the fourth place team in the NL West. But depending on how their offseason finishes, maybe the Padres finish behind the Giants by the time we get to spring training and we do our projections. But let's say the D-backs do miss out and lose Randal Grichuk to the Giants. Who are some potential replacements? And I'm talking about guys where, if you go back to last offseason, when we signed Grichuk, I remember I was talking like this was just the cherry on top to the offseason, right? He was our second DH, cheap fourth outfielder. Like, he wasn't coming in to break the bank. And so who are some other players that could be the fourth outfielder for the D-backs, right? Can split time at DH for the D-backs and not exactly cost a lot of money. If we're looking for the super cheap, a little bit more bottom of the barrel, this is someone who I do think has some potential as like a guy that could have a little moment with the D-backs and have maybe a rejuvenation season. How about a little Ramon Laureano? Kind of a throwback name. He's still not old, only going to be 30 years old next season. Was really good his first couple years in Oakland in 2018, 2019. I think he was like suspended for PEDs, has been like really not that great the last few years, but last year in 67 games with the Atlanta Braves, 296 average, 832 OPS, 10 bombs, and he's always had speed, always been a solid defender. If he's got a little bit of pop too, like I could see Ramon Laureano being that Randal Grichuk type, comes in, maybe not have the kind of offensive season he had last year, whether we're talking about Ramon or Grichuk, but could Ramon come in and be like a 750 OPS guy, provide some useful speed on the bags, provide a little bit of pop? I think he could. You look at his numbers from last year in 2024, the thing that really stuck out against left-handed pitchers, 305 average, 869 OPS, crush lefties. So I love Ramon Laureano for that. If you want to go up a tier, a little bit more expensive, kind of in that Randal Grichuk price range, because Ramon Laureano is projected to make like no money, you could go a little Austin Hayes, who played with both Baltimore and Philly, had a very disappointing year last year, sub 700 OPS, but look at his numbers the prior 3 seasons, 21 to 23, and he's basically Randal Grichuk. When you look at the numbers side by side, both of them in like that 16 to 22 home run range, both of them in like that 715 to 780 OPS range, both of them solid defenders, got some pop. Like Austin Hayes could immediately be Randal Grichuk 2.0. I think he has the perfect kind of profile to fit it. I think when we look at his career numbers, he's exactly Randal Grichuk 2.0. And when you look at his numbers from last year, I just said disappointing slash line. But if you only look at it against left-handed pitching specifically, he batted .354 with a .941 OPS in 49 games against lefties. So another guy. Again, you're only using him for half the time at the DH spot, only a right-handed power bat, which he was still excelling at last year, so I would still bring him in. Then the final guy, who is probably in between Austin Hayes and Ramon Laureano in terms of what his potential price tag could be next year. How about a little Adam Duvall, who's coming off a really disappointing season with the Braves, but the year prior, he was really good in Boston offensively. And this is a guy with still a lot of pop. And again, you look at the numbers last year in 60 games against left-handed pitching, 856 OPS. All three of these guys, you look at their slash lines from last year, and it's not very good. But if you just look at their slash lines against lefties, they're all-star level position players. And so for the D-backs, who might lose out on Randal Grichuk to their NL West rival San Francisco Giants, I think getting any of those as backup options as they just half the time right-handed DH, I think it would be perfectly fine. Fourth outfielder too, if it's a Ramon Laureano or Austin Hayes, like I would not be upset at all if the D-backs went in that direction. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow, or not tomorrow, come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy.